Welcome to another episode of Management Unplugged by GR. We are so excited to have you join us today for a deep dive into a topic that, well, if you're like many, might initially sound like something relegated to dusty legal textbooks. Labor relations.
Yeah, it sometimes gets that reputation, doesn't it? Dry, maybe a bit intimidating.
Exactly. Perhaps you've heard the phrase and immediately thought of, complex legislation or jargon-filled meetings. But I promise you, this deep dive is anything but. This is really a profound journey into the very fabric of how people interact, how they cooperate, and sometimes how they conflict within, well, the most fundamental setting of our modern lives, the workplace.
It's about human dynamics at its core.
If you've ever pondered the underlying reasons certain workplaces have unions, or maybe wondered about the intricate dance of power and negotiation that unfolds behind the headlines of a major strike, then you're in exactly the right place. Today, our mission is to peel back those layers, to really unpack the complex, often dramatic world of labor relations. We'll trace its tumultuous roots from the gritty early days of industrialization all the way to the sophisticated negotiations and increasingly cooperative strategies we see today. Okay, let's unpack this fascinating journey.
And fascinating truly is the word, because beyond the legal definitions and processes, the core insight here is that labor relations isn't just a function or, a department within an organization. It's a profound lens through which we understand how power, how voice, and even basic human dignity play out in every single workplace. It shapes not only policies, but the very culture and spirit of an organization. It's a dynamic, ever-evolving relationship constantly shaped by underlying currents of both cooperation and, at times, significant conflict. And it's all guided by the intricate art of negotiation. Understanding this isn't merely for HR professionals or legal experts, it's really for anyone who works, anyone who leads, and anyone who wants to grasp the fundamental human element of business.
I couldn't agree more. So let's travel back in time, maybe, all the way to the very genesis of collective action in the United States. Imagine, if you will, not the romanticized vision of bustling innovation, but the harsh, often brutal reality of early industrial America. Picture hundreds, sometimes thousands of workers crammed into loud, dimly lit factory floors, where the machinery often lacked even the most rudimentary safety guards. Just think about that.
Now, OSHA back then, certainly.
Not at all. Think about grueling, relentless hours, sunup to sundown, 6 or even 7 days a week with no guaranteed breaks, certainly no paid sick leave, and often no safety gear beyond what a worker might, ingeniously fashion themselves. And for all this back-breaking, dangerous labor, they earned meager wages, barely enough to put food on the table for their families, let alone build any semblance of financial security. Can you just put yourself in their shoes for a moment, experiencing that deep sense of exploitation with absolutely no safety net, no one to turn to, feeling completely at the mercy of an employer who held all the cards? It was, by any measure, a brutal existence.
Yeah, when you paint that picture so vividly, it becomes strikingly clear why labor movements were not just inevitable, but an essential human response. These weren't merely isolated instances of hardship. They were systemic conditions that naturally compelled workers to seek solidarity and, strength in numbers. And what's profoundly unsettling here is that this nascent collective power was often met with fierce employer resistance. Before landmark legislation like the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, employers had a whole arsenal of tactics to undermine any attempts at organization.
Right.
Consider the yellow dog contract, a term some of our listeners might have heard of. This wasn't just exploitation, it was a direct frontal assault on the very concept of worker solidarity.
How did that work exactly?
Well, you wanted a job. You desperately needed to feed your family. You had to sign a contract explicitly stating that you would not join a union or even associate with one as a condition of employment.
Wow, just to get the job.
Just to get the job. This tactic vividly underscores the fundamental human desire for fairness, for dignity, and for a collective voice, even when facing these overwhelming power imbalances.
That's a truly chilling thought, signing away your fundamental right to associate just to earn a living wage. But, as you said, such a brutal status quo couldn't last forever. The true turning point, when things really started to shift, came with organized strikes. These weren't just spontaneous outbursts of anger. They were often desperate, calculated pleas for change, born out of that shared desperation you described.
Exactly. They were strategic in many ways.
And it wasn't just about individual workplaces anymore. This period saw the establishment of significant unifying organizations like the American Federation of Labor, or AFL. That marked a huge step forward, didn't it? Bringing together early efforts to organize workers across different crafts and industries.
Absolutely. A major consolidation of power.
This wasn't just about demanding better wages from a single factory owner. It was about laying the groundwork for validating collective bargaining rights, which would eventually become enshrined as the law of the land, something legally protected and recognized.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're really talking about here is a fundamental rebalancing of power in society, reaching far beyond specific industries. These movements weren't simply about small groups of disgruntled employees. They represented a seismic shift in societal structures and the very relationship between labor and capital. The legal framework we largely take for granted today, which enshrines rights like collective bargaining, it didn't just appear out of thin air. It was a hard-won victory. Fought for through decades of struggle, protest, negotiation, it's a powerful testament to the enduring power of collective action when people realize they are indeed stronger together.
So if that genesis was about survival and, well, a basic fight for dignity, let's fast forward a bit to the modern era. Today, when we talk about why people join forces and form unions, there's a common misconception that it's just about higher wages.
The paycheck focus.
Right. While economic benefits are undoubtedly a significant driver and always have been, modern unionization is often propelled by much deeper organizational dynamics. So I want to pose a question to you and to our listeners. What if, at its heart, it's not just about the money, but something far more fundamental like respect and having a voice?
You've hit on an absolutely critical insight that's often overlooked. While economic factors remain paramount, absolutely, the why behind modern union formation frequently delves into these profound non-economic drivers. It's often rooted in a perceived lack of respect from management, a lack of transparency in decision-making, or even limited opportunities for career growth and advancement within an organization.
So feeling stuck or ignored.
Exactly. When employees feel their voices are consistently unheard, when there's a breakdown of trust with management, or when they feel there's no clear internal path for addressing grievances or seeking advancement, they become disengaged. And crucially, those disengaged workers are precisely the ones most likely to look towards a union for protection, for advocacy, and for a formal collective mechanism to ensure their concerns are not only heard, but actually acted upon.
That makes sense.
Think of it like a community forming a neighborhood association, because local residents feel consistently ignored by the city council on issues that directly impact their daily lives. It's about having a collective voice when individual voices feel powerless and unheard.
That analogy paints a very clear picture.
Yeah.
It's about feeling like you're genuinely part of the conversation, not just an interchangeable cog in a large machine. And that brings us to the critical role of the overall workplace climate. It seems intuitive, right? That an environment built on trust, fairness, and open dialogue would significantly reduce the need for employees to organize externally in the first place.
It absolutely does.
You can almost see how effective employee engagement strategies, when implemented thoughtfully, could actually prevent adversarial labor relations from ever taking root, making external union representation feel less necessary.
Precisely. This highlights a powerful, proactive approach for organizations. It's about cultivating an environment where employees feel genuinely valued, respected, and heard. That makes the external advocacy of a union less compelling because internal mechanisms are already serving their needs, or at least feel like they could. When there are clear internal channels for feedback that are actually acted upon, when management demonstrates transparency, and when employees feel they have a legitimate stake in the company's success and are treated equitably, the impetus to unionize often diminishes considerably.
So it's good management, really.
Fundamentally, yes. This proactive stance isn't just about union avoidance, though some might frame it that way. It's fundamentally about building a stronger, more resilient organizational culture. And it ultimately has a long-term positive impact on everything from productivity and innovation to overall business stability.
Okay, so once a union is either formed or, deeply embedded in a workplace, what do they actually do? What are their core objectives beyond just sitting at a bargaining table? I understand there are 4 main types of objectives: economic, legal, political, and social. Could you break those down a bit?
Yeah.
And maybe delve a little deeper into that social aspect? It sounds intriguing.
Absolutely. Unions, at their core, pursue a multifaceted mission for their members. The economic objective is perhaps the most immediately obvious and tangible, securing higher wages, better benefits, and safer working conditions. This is the bread and butter, covering everything from comprehensive health insurance and robust retirement plans to adequate breaks, fair overtime pay, and protection from hazardous work environments.
The basics, but crucial basics.
Definitely. Then there's the legal objective. This is about ensuring strict adherence to labor laws and actively enforcing the rights of workers as laid out in collective bargaining agreements and broader legislation. They essentially act as a watchdog, ensuring fair treatment and due process are consistently applied.
Like an enforcement arm for the contract.
In many ways, yes. The political objective involves influencing broader policy and public opinion. Unions actively lobby lawmakers, endorse political candidates, and run public campaigns to promote legislation that benefits workers and protects their interests, often at a national or state level. They understand that workplace conditions are often shaped by broader legal and political landscapes.
So they play the long game too.
They have to. And finally, the social objective, which you asked about. This is deeply important and often understated. This is about fostering solidarity, providing a sense of collective job security, and ensuring equitable treatment for all members. It's about building a strong sense of community and shared purpose among workers, providing a network of mutual support, and ensuring that no individual worker feels isolated or vulnerable when facing challenges with management.
Like a community within the workplace.
Precisely. This collective identity is a powerful, unifying force that provides psychological as well as practical benefits. Now, to further maintain their operational strength and influence, unions often secure various security clauses within their contracts.
Ah, okay. What are those?
Well, while the most restrictive closed shops, where workers must be union members before being hired, are legally banned in the U.S., you'll commonly find union shops. In a union shop, new hires must join the union after a certain period, maybe 30 or 60 days.
Got it.
Or you might see agency shops, where non-members must still pay union dues or a service fee because they benefit from the union's bargaining efforts, even if they choose not to be full members.
So they pay for the service they receive.
Essentially, yes. There are also things like preferential shops, favoring members in hiring, or maintenance of membership clauses, meaning if you join, you have to stay in for the duration of the contract. The core takeaway here is that these clauses are vital for a union's financial stability and its ability to effectively represent its members. They give it long-term leverage and ensure its continued presence beyond just the initial bargaining table.
Right. It ensures they have the resources to operate.
Exactly. This means a structured, legally defined relationship where the union plays a significant, ongoing role in many aspects of employment.
That truly clarifies the wide net that unions cast, influencing not just the bargaining table, but the broader societal and political landscape for their members. Now, let's pivot to the rulebook, because this entire intricate dance between labor and management is heavily shaped by law. In the U.S., the grandparent of modern labor law is arguably the National Labor Relations Act, or NLRA, of 1935. This was a truly monumental piece of legislation, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely revolutionary, no question.
It fundamentally shifted the power balance by establishing the legal right to collective bargaining and, crucially, prohibiting employers from interfering with union activities.
Revolutionary is the right word. Before the NLRA, employers held immense, almost unchecked power. They could, and often did, fire workers for merely attempting to organize, monitor their activities, and essentially dictate employment terms with very little legal recourse for employees.
A huge power imbalance.
Massive. The NLRA changed that dramatically. It gave workers a fundamental legal shield, finally empowering them to organize, bargain collectively, and engage in concerted activities like striking without fear of illegal retaliation. It didn't just codify existing practices, it fundamentally redefined the power relationship between employers and employees. It was a landmark piece of legislation forged in the economic and social turmoil of the Great Depression.
Right, the context is key.
And deeply connected to the broader social justice movements of that era, all aiming to create a more equitable and stable society.
So the NLRA undeniably swung the pendulum heavily towards empowering unions. But in any power dynamic, there's often a pushback or recalibration, right? Was the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, in your view, a necessary recalibration to truly level the playing field? Or did it risk undermining the very worker protections the NLRA had just established?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of the ongoing debate. Taft-Hartley definitely aimed to recalibrate that balance.
How so?
Well, it sought to curb what some perceived as excessive union power that had grown post-NLRA. For instance, it banned closed shops, which we just talked about.
Right.
And it banned something called secondary boycotts. That's a fascinating example of what it prohibited.
Can you explain that? A secondary boycott.
Sure. Imagine a union has a dispute with a primary employer, let's say a specific shoe manufacturer. A secondary boycott would involve that union then picketing or encouraging consumers to boycott a different company, maybe a retail store, simply because that store sells shoes made by the manufacturer they are in dispute with.
Ah, so targeting a neutral third party.
Exactly. Taft-Hartley prohibited this, among other things, to limit the broader economic reach and disruptive potential of union actions on these neutral third parties. Beyond that, it also allowed states to enact what are known as right-to-work laws.
Right to work. Okay, we hear that term a lot.
We do. These laws prohibit mandatory union membership or dues payment as a condition of employment. This significantly weakened a union's financial power in those states, as they couldn't compel all workers who benefited from their negotiations to contribute financially.
Undermining the agency shop idea we discussed?
Precisely. And here's a truly unique historical detail that speaks to the era. During the Cold War, Taft-Hartley even required union leaders to affirm they were not communists.
Wow, really? Reflecting the time.
Absolutely reflecting the intense geopolitical tensions. But perhaps most crucially for public welfare, it empowered the President of the United States to delay strikes for 80 days if they threaten national safety or health. Think air traffic controllers or major port strikes.
Yeah.
This illustrates the act's profound impact on the broader economy and public well-being beyond just individual workplace dynamics.
So a major check on strike power in critical sectors.
A very significant one. And this really raises a fundamental and ongoing question. How do you effectively balance the essential rights of workers to organize and strike with the broader needs of the economy and public safety? It's a perpetually delicate act of legislative tightrope walking.
That's a perfect encapsulation of that inherent tension. Now, while we've been deeply focused on the U.S. context, it's really important to remember that labor movements aren't just an American story. They're a global phenomenon, each country charting its own unique path. So let's take a quick, intriguing detour to India. How does their labor movement compare, and what makes it particularly distinct?
India offers a truly distinct and compelling journey in labor relations. Its movement traces its roots back to the colonial industrialization period in the early 20th century, gaining significant traction amidst the fight for independence. Post-independence, unionization expanded considerably in both public and private sectors. Their legal framework is quite robust, governed by foundational acts like the Trade Unions Act of 1926, the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947.
There's a long history there, too.
A very long history. And more recently, the Code on Industrial Relations of 2020, which aimed to simplify and consolidate various existing labor laws into a more comprehensive framework. But what's particularly compelling and innovative in India is the emergence of organizations like SIA, the Self-Employed Women's Association.
SIA. Tell me more. That sounds unique.
It is truly unique because SIWA represents women in the vast informal sector. Think street vendors, home-based workers, agricultural laborers, people who often fall completely outside traditional employee relationships and therefore outside traditional union structures.
How do they even organize that?
It's ingenious. SIWA blends traditional trade unionism with cooperative economic models and social advocacy. They don't just negotiate for wages, which is challenging enough in the informal economy. They actively help members access microfinance, provide education and skills training, facilitate access to healthcare, and even offer housing support. It's much more holistic.
Wow, so it's like a union plus a social support system plus a cooperative.
Exactly. It pushes the boundaries of what a labor movement can achieve, demonstrating a remarkable adaptability and evolving nature globally. It shows that collective action can take many forms to meet diverse and often overlooked needs, transcending the conventional factory or office setting.
That's incredible, a testament to innovation within the labor movement itself, demonstrating how the core principles of collective action can be adapted to vastly different contexts.
So bringing it back to the U.S. context for a moment, let's say a group of workers decides they want to form a union. How does a workplace actually become unionized? It's certainly not magic. It's a carefully orchestrated campaign, isn't it? What are the formal steps involved in a typical union drive and election process?
It absolutely is a structured, legally defined process, much like a carefully planned campaign. It all begins with initial contact. This is where union representatives or maybe active employees reach out to their colleagues in a particular workplace to gauge interest in forming or joining a union, sort of testing the waters.
Makes sense. If there's enough enthusiasm, the next crucial step is getting employees to sign authorization cards. For the process to move forward legally, at least 30% of employees in the proposed bargaining unit must sign these cards.
30%. That's the magic number.
That's the minimum legal threshold to petition for an election. It signals their desire for union representation. Once that's met, the union files a petition with the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB. The NLRB then conducts an NLRB hearing. This hearing is a legal formality that confirms the eligibility of the employees to form a union, are they supervisors, for example, and determines the precise terms and scope of the election, ensuring everything is above board and legally compliant.
So the NLRB acts as the referee.
Exactly. Then comes the most active and often intense phase, the campaign period. This is where both the union and management intensely educate and influence employees, presenting their arguments for and against unionization. It can be a period of significant tension, vigorous debate, and strong persuasion tactics from both sides. Flyers, meetings, emails, you name it.
I can imagine high stakes.
Very high stakes. Finally, there's the election itself, conducted by secret ballot, usually overseen by the NLRB to ensure fairness and prevent coercion. A simple majority of those who actually vote determines the outcome. If the union wins, it becomes the exclusive bargaining representative for those employees. The entire process is highly sensitive and subject to strict legal rules. It's much like a political campaign, but with very specific rules enforced by a federal referee.
I can only imagine the tension in that campaign period, with both sides making their case. And speaking of tension, a critical player in all of this, especially during a union campaign, is the supervisor. They're the direct link between management and the workers on the ground. Their conduct during a union campaign must be absolutely critical and, I assume, highly scrutinized.
Oh, intensely scrutinized. You're absolutely right. Supervisors are on a constant tightrope walk during a union campaign. Their actions are under the microscope because they can directly influence employee choices, and violating legal guidelines can have severe repercussions for the company.
Like what kind of repercussion?
Well, they could commit what's called an unfair labor practice, or ULP. There are very specific legal boundaries they must adhere to. These guidelines are often summarized by two memorable acronyms, TIPS and 4.
Ifs and 4. Okay, let's hear it.
TIPS stands for what supervisors must not do, threaten. They cannot threaten employees with job loss, demotion, or loss of benefits if they support the union. For instance, a supervisor saying, if the union gets in, you can kiss those annual raises goodbye. That's an illegal threat.
Okay, no threats.
Interrogate. They cannot ask employees about their union support, who signed authorization cards, or about union meetings. You can't ask a worker, so are you going to that union meeting tonight? That's interrogation.
Got it. No spying either, I assume.
Exactly. That's spy. They cannot engage in surveillance of union activities or meetings, like overtly observing a union meeting or asking employees to report on colleagues' union activities. Promise. They cannot promise employees benefits, raises, or improved conditions if they vote against the union. For example, suddenly announcing new, unexpected perks just before a union vote to sway opinion would likely be seen as a prohibited promise.
So TIPS, threaten, interrogate, promise, spy. All definite no-nos.
Absolutely. Violating any of these can have serious consequences, potentially invalidating election results, leading to unfair labor practice charges against the company, and in some cases, even requiring the company to recognize and bargain with the union without an election, a bargaining order.
Wow. So what can they do? That's 4RE.
That's 4R. It outlines what supervisors can do. Facts. They can share factual information about union dues. The bargaining process, for example, explaining that bargaining often starts from a blank slate, not necessarily from current benefits or the union's history, provided it's accurate.
Okay, facts are fine.
Opinions. They can express their personal, non-threatening opinions about unions or unionization as long as it doesn't cross into coercion. I personally believe a union isn't right for our company is generally okay if stated carefully.
So personal belief, not a threat.
Exactly. Rules. They can inform employees about existing, neutrally applied company policies regarding union organizing, like rules about soliciting or distributing literature on company property during work hours.
Makes sense. Consistent rule.
And experiences. They can share their personal experiences with unions, perhaps from a previous job, provided it's non-coercive and presented factually, not as a veiled threat.
FORE, facts, opinions, rules, experiences.
Right. So you can see the incredibly fine line supervisors walk. That common mistake you asked about earlier. It's often an accidental promise or a well-meaning but ill-phrased threat that crosses the line. Supervisors, especially during a stressful campaign, can feel pressure to say anything to keep their teams from unionizing.
Yeah, I can see how that happens.
Navigating these rules while still being able to communicate effectively with their teams is the real tightrope walk for management.
That's a fantastic breakdown, making it much clearer where the boundaries lie. Okay, so once a union is certified, the real dance begins. Collective bargaining. This isn't just a one-off meeting, is it? It's a multi-stage process, almost like a complex negotiation for a big project, with a lot of back-and-forth proposals and counter-proposals. Can you walk us through the stages of reaching a collective bargaining agreement?
It absolutely is a multi-stage process requiring significant effort, strategy, and patience from both sides. It really starts long before they sit at the table with meticulous preparation. Both the union and management define their objectives, gather extensive data, things like wrench comparisons in similar industries or locations, productivity metrics, employee feedback surveys, cost of benefits, and thorough reviews of past collective bargaining agreements if they exist.
Doing their homework.
Exactly. This is the crucial homework phase that sets the stage for realistic and effective negotiations. You need data to back up your positions. Next is the actual negotiation phase, which is the core of the process. This involves the systematic exchange of proposals, counter-proposals, concessions, and just a lot of discussion. It's a dynamic back and forth where both sides aim to achieve their objectives while finding common ground, often through compromise.
The give and take.
The real give and take. If all goes well, this leads to an agreement, often called a tentative agreement initially. Here, the mutually accepted terms are finalized and meticulously documented into what becomes the collective bargaining agreement. This is the moment of handshake and legal formality.
But it's not final yet.
Not quite for the union side. The process isn't truly complete until ratification. This is a critical democratic step where the union members themselves vote, usually by secret ballot, to approve the negotiated deal. This is where the members truly own the agreement that has been negotiated on their behalf, giving it legitimacy and buy-in. If they vote it down, it's back to the bargaining table.
So the members have the final say.
They do. Finally, once ratified comes implementation. This is where the terms of the agreement are put into action and continuously monitored. It involves putting the agreed-upon wages, benefits, working conditions, grievance procedures, everything into practice, ensuring compliance daily. Effective bargaining, fundamentally, relies heavily on trust, which can be hard-won, thorough preparation, and absolute clarity on what each side is seeking and what their priorities are.
Like building that house together you mentioned.
Exactly. You need that solid blueprint, clear communication throughout the construction, and everyone agreeing to the final design before you move in and start living under its roof.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the collaborative, yet often challenging nature of it. Now, you mentioned the terms of the agreement. But not everything can be negotiated, right? I imagine there are some things that are absolutely non-negotiable, perhaps because they violate fundamental laws. So what's typically on the table, what's permissible, and what's definitely off-limits in these negotiations?
You're right. Not everything is fair game for negotiation, for very important reasons. Bargaining items are typically categorized into 3 types: mandatory, permissible, and illegal.
Okay, let's start with mandatory. What falls under that?
Mandatory items are those that must be negotiated in good faith if raised by either party. These are the core elements of the employment relationship, things directly impacting wages, hours, and other terms and conditions of employment. That's the legal phrase. This includes things like wages, base pay rates, overtime, shift differentials, bonus structures, pay scales, working hours, workday week length, breaks, lunch periods, schedules, safety standards, workplace safety rules, equipment, training, grievance procedures, the process for resolving contract disputes, benefits like health insurance, pensions, paid time off, layoff procedures, discipline rules, promotion criteria. These are the absolute essentials.
So the core stuff, they have to talk about it if someone brings it up.
They have to bargain in good faith over it, yes. Refusing to do so can be an unfair labor practice.
Okay, what about permissible items?
Permissible items are those that can be negotiated, but neither party is legally required to bargain over them. They can be included in the contract if both sides mutually agree, but they won't lead to an impasse or a ULP charge if one side simply refuses to discuss them. Examples here might include broader strategic business decisions like, say, deciding which products the company will make, the price of those products, or decisions about advertising, or maybe benefits for already retired employees, the use of the union label, or settlement of unfair labor practice charges.
So things more removed from the day-to-day terms of employment.
Often, yes. Or things that fall outside that core wages, hours, terms and conditions definition. They're good faith topics, but not legally compelled.
And finally, illegal items. I assume this is pretty clear-cut.
It is. Illegal items are things that are strictly prohibited by law and cannot be negotiated or included in a contract under any circumstances. This category unequivocally includes any provision that would violate existing law, such as requiring discriminatory practices based on race, gender, religion, national origin, age, disability, or any other protected characteristic. Or maybe a clause demanding a closed shop, which we know is illegal under Taft-Hartley.
Right. Things that break the law are off the table.
Exactly. These are off limits because they infringe upon fundamental human rights and legally protected civil liberties. So while a lot is potentially on the table, the legal and ethical boundaries are very clear, ensuring fairness and compliance with the law.
That certainly clarifies what's on and off the table and why some things are simply non-negotiable for very good reasons. But what happens when talks hit a wall? When all the preparation, negotiation, and back and forth don't lead to an agreement and the parties just fail to reach a consensus, that's what you call an impasse.
Right. Yes, an impasse is the term used when the parties have bargained in good faith but simply cannot reach an agreement on one or more mandatory subjects. It's a critical moment.
Because everything could just break down.
It could. A prolonged impasse can be incredibly costly for both sides economically, relationally, and for public image. So when this occurs, there are several crucial methods for resolving the dispute, often involving neutral third parties stepping in to help bridge the gap.
Okay, what are those methods?
The first, and often the gentlest, is mediation. In mediation, a neutral third party, a mediator, is brought in to facilitate dialogue between the union and management. The mediator doesn't make decisions or impose solutions. Their role is to help the parties communicate more effectively, identify common ground, maybe explore creative solutions they hadn't thought of, and ultimately guide them towards reaching their own agreement.
So, facilitator, not a judge.
Precisely. It's about opening up lines of communication that may have become blocked by entrenched positions or, frankly, emotional fatigue. Another method is fact-finding. Here, a neutral third party investigates the disputed issues, gathers information and arguments from both sides, and then presents them with a detailed, neutral report on their findings. This report often includes recommendations for settlement. While the recommendations are typically not binding, the process helps to objectively clarify the positions, provides an impartial assessment, and can put significant public or internal pressure on the parties to reconsider their stances based on factual analysis.
Sort of like getting an independent audit of the disagreement.
That's a good way to think about it. Finally, there's arbitration. This is the most definitive form of impasse resolution because a third party makes a binding decision.
Binding. Okay, so this one sticks.
It does. In voluntary arbitration, both the union and management agree beforehand to submit their dispute to an arbitrator, and they commit to abiding by the arbitrator's ruling, whatever it may be. Compulsory arbitration, on the other hand, is required by law, often for public sector disputes where strikes might be restricted or illegal. Think of police, firefighters, sometimes teachers, to ensure essential public services are not interrupted.
So the government mandates it in certain cases?
Yes. The arbitrator acts much like a judge in these cases, hearing arguments and evidence from both sides and then issuing a final, legally enforceable decision on the terms of the contract. These methods, mediation, fact-finding, arbitration, are absolutely crucial for preventing long, drawn-out conflicts that could cripple an organization or even an entire industry. They save both sides immense economic and relational tolls.
Those resolution methods sound like critical lifelines when things get tough and the stakes are high. But sometimes, despite all the efforts to mediate or arbitrate, talks still break down, or one side feels they have no other recourse. And that's when things can escalate to what many people think of first when they hear labor relations, strikes. A strike is often called a union's ultimate weapon. But I imagine this powerful tool isn't monolithic, is it? What are the different types of strikes and what distinct purposes do they serve?
You're absolutely right. The strike is indeed a powerful tool, a union's ultimate leverage point to apply pressure by withholding labor. And they do come in different strategically deployed forms. Economic strikes are perhaps the most common and straightforward. These are purely about pursuing better wages, enhanced benefits, or improved working conditions. The primary goal is to put direct economic pressure on the employer by halting production or services, forcing them to concede to demands.
So, fighting for a bigger piece of the pie.
Essentially, yes. Then there are unfair labor practice strikes. These occur when workers go on strike specifically in response to an employer's alleged violation of labor law, like illegally firing union organizers, refusing to bargain in good faith, or engaging in that TPS behavior we talked about. These are about protesting illegal actions and seeking remedies through the NLRB. Workers in these strikes have more legal protections regarding reinstatement.
Ah, that's an important distinction.
It is. Wildcat strikes are particularly intriguing because they are unauthorized internal protests. They happen without the official sanction or approval of union leadership, often arising from immediate localized grievances or a sudden surge of frustration. They can be tricky for union leadership to manage, actually.
Kind of a rogue action.
You could say that. And then there are sympathy strikes, where workers strike not because of a direct dispute with their own employer, but in solidarity with another union or group of workers who are involved in a dispute elsewhere. It's about showing collective strength and mutual support across different workplaces or industries, though Taft-Hartley put limits on these two.
Okay, so different reasons, different legal statuses sometimes.
Exactly. And beyond the strike itself, unions have a range of supplementary tactics designed to amplify their message and pressure. Picketing involves workers walking outside the workplace, often carrying signs. This can be informational, just letting the public know, or more disruptive, aiming to discourage customers or non-striking workers from crossing the line.
The classic picket line image.
Right. Inside games are clever tactics employees use while still on the job, like intentional slowdowns in productivity or working to rule, strictly adhering to every single tiny rule and regulation, which ironically can significantly impede output.
Malicious compliance almost.
Pretty much. Corporate campaigns take the fight beyond the immediate workplace, targeting a company's image, its investors, its board members, or its business partners to apply broader financial or reputational pressure. And finally, boycotts urge consumers or other businesses not to buy products or services from the company in dispute, aiming to hit their bottom line directly through customer action.
The whole arsenal of tools.
It is. These are like different gears in a union's toolkit, each used for a specific purpose, ranging from direct economic pressure via strikes to public persuasion and reputation management.
So those are the union's strategic moves, a diverse toolkit designed to apply pressure. But what about management? They don't just sit idly by and take the punches during these high-stakes conflicts, do they? I'm sure they have their own counterplays and strategies in response to union actions. What can management do?
Absolutely not. Management has its own equally strategic set of responses to union actions designed to maintain operations, protect the business, and put pressure back on the union. One key strategy is the lockout. This is essentially management's equivalent of a strike, but in reverse. It's a preemptive or retaliatory shutdown of the workplace by the employer to put economic pressure on workers, preventing them from earning wages until they agree to management's terms or the dispute is resolved. It can be a very powerful move.
So they lock the doors.
Literally or figuratively, yes. Another common and often highly controversial response is bringing in temporary replacements or subcontracting. During a strike, management might hire temporary workers, sometimes controversially referred to as scabs, or outsource work to other companies to maintain operations and minimize lost revenue.
That must escalate tensions significantly.
Oh, it almost always does. The ability to permanently replace economic strikers under certain conditions is one of the most contentious areas of labor law. Management can also pursue legal remedies through injunctions. If union activities are deemed unlawful, for example, if picketing becomes violent, blocks public access excessively, or violates specific ordinances, the company can seek court orders, called injunctions, to stop those specific illegal activities.
Using the courts to restrain the union.
Correct. And crucially, public communication is a vital strategy for management, too. During a dispute, management will actively engage with the media, employees, especially non-striking ones, and customers to manage public perception, explain their position, justify their actions, and try to retain customer trust and loyalty. They want to control the narrative.
Battling for public opinion.
Very much so. Ultimately, successful conflict management for both sides hinges on clear and consistent communication, strict legal compliance to avoid unfair labor practice charges on either side, and thorough contingency planning to navigate disruptions. So what does this all mean for a company trying to stay afloat during a dispute? It means a very careful balancing act, weighing immediate operational needs against long-term relationships with their workforce and their public image. It's incredibly complex.
That paints a very clear picture of the high-stakes chess match that can unfold during these disputes.
Wow. But once a deal is struck, once that collective bargaining agreement is reached and ratified, it's not just a handshake and a sigh of relief, is it? It's captured in a labor contract. And I've heard these can be incredibly detailed documents. You called it the Bible of the workplace earlier. What are the key components you typically find in one of these living documents?
That's a perfect way to describe it. A living document, and indeed often the Bible of the workplace. These contracts are incredibly comprehensive because they cover virtually every conceivable aspect of the working relationship. They aim to minimize ambiguities in future disputes. Key elements you'll almost always find include union recognition and dues collection. This section formally acknowledges the union as the exclusive bargaining agent for specific employees, the bargaining unit, and often outlines procedures for collecting union dues, sometimes directly through payroll deduction, that dues checkoff we mentioned.
Defining the relationship formally. Yes. Pay scales and wage adjustments. Usually a large, detailed section outlining hourly rates, salary ranges for different job classifications, shift differentials, overtime rules, and explicit provisions for how and when wages increase annual raises, cost of living adjustments, COLAs, performance-based pay, etc.
All the money stuff clearly laid out.
Exactly. Overtime and leave entitlements. Specific, detailed rules for overtime pay calculation, which days count as paid holidays, how many vacation days and sick leave days employees accrue, often based on seniority, bereavement leave, jury duty leave, maybe parental leave, and other forms of paid or unpaid time off.
Takes the guesswork out of time off.
It should. Benefits. This is another major section covering all employee benefits, detailed descriptions of health insurance plans, including employee contributions, dental and vision coverage, life insurance, short-term and long-term disability benefits, retirement plans like traditional pensions or 401k contributions, and maybe various allowances for things like uniforms, tools, or travel.
A huge part of total compensation.
Absolutely. Job classifications and promotions. Descriptions of different job roles, their duties and requirements, and the clear, often seniority-based or skill-based, procedures for promotions, transfers, filling vacancies, and internal job postings. Ensures transparency and career progression, discipline procedures, and termination policies. This is critical. Clearly defined, usually multi-step processes, progressive discipline, for addressing performance issues or misconduct, and the specific grounds and procedures for employee discipline, warnings, suspensions of termination. It outlines just cause requirements.
Due process for employees?
Precisely. And importantly, health, safety, and wellness commitments. Provisions for maintaining a safe and healthy work environment, specific safety training requirements, establishment of joint labor management safety committees, and sometimes even commitments to wellness programs or mental health support.
So it covers almost everything imaginable about the job.
Pretty much. These contracts truly cover an enormous amount of ground, acting as the operational blueprint for the day-to-day relationship between the employer and its unionized workforce, leaving, ideally, very little to chance or individual interpretation.
It's clear that these contracts leave virtually no stone unturned. But even with the most meticulously crafted rulebook in place, disagreements are bound to arise. People interpret things differently, right? So what happens when someone thinks the rules aren't being followed? How do they handle those inevitable disputes that pop up day to day, beyond the big negotiation process? I assume there's a formal process for resolving them, something called a grievance procedure.
Exactly. That's precisely where the grievance procedure comes in. It's the formal, structured process outlined within the collective bargaining agreement itself for resolving disputes or complaints arising from the interpretation or application of that agreement. It's designed to provide a clear, agreed-upon path for employees, usually through their union representative, the steward, to address their concerns. It starts informally and escalates through predefined steps if necessary.
So it's a built-in conflict resolution mechanism.
It is. A typical grievance procedure follows a multi-step escalation process, ensuring every issue gets a fair hearing, usually within specific time limits at each step. It usually begins with a verbal complaint to the immediate supervisor. This is the first, most informal step. The employee, often with their union steward, tries to resolve the issue directly and quickly with the supervisor. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding.
Trying to solve it at the lowest level first.
Right. If that doesn't resolve it, the complaint becomes more formal with a written complaint and union involvement. The grievance is put into writing on a specific form, detailing the specific issue, which contract clause it allegedly violates, the facts of the situation, and what resolution or remedy is sought. The union steward becomes more actively involved in presenting the employee's case to the supervisor or perhaps a higher-level manager.
Getting it on paper.
Exactly. Documentation is key. If still unresolved at that level, it often escalates to a grievance committee discussion or a meeting between higher-level union representatives, like the local union president or business agent, and management officials, like HR managers or department heads. They discuss the dispute, review the facts, and try to find a mutually acceptable resolution, perhaps looking at precedents or broader implications.
Moving up the chain on both sides.
Correct. Finally, if all previous steps fail to produce a settlement, the grievance can proceed to arbitration if unresolved. As we discussed in the context of impasses, this is typically the final binding step for contract interpretation disputes as well. A neutral third-party arbitrator is selected, often from a pre-approved list. They hold a hearing, much like a mini-trial, hearing arguments, testimony, and evidence from both the union and management sides of the case. Then, the arbitrator issues a definitive, written decision on how the contract should be applied or interpreted in that specific situation.
And that decision is usually final.
Yes, the arbitrator's decision is typically final and legally binding on both parties, with very limited grounds for appeal in court. It acts as the ultimate impartial judge for that specific grievance. Key principles for effective grievance handling throughout this process are thorough documentation at each step, consistency in applying contract terms and procedures across similar cases, adhering to the time limits, and maintaining confidentiality as appropriate to protect all parties involved.
So it's a very structured process.
Very structured. It's like that series of increasingly formal meetings we talked about, with a neutral judge at the very end if necessary, ensuring that the living document is fairly interpreted and applied every single day. Have you seen cases where a grievance procedure, despite its formality, actually helped salvage a relationship or even improved a process rather than just resolving a dispute?
That systematic approach really underscores the commitment to fairness embedded in the process. And yes, absolutely. Sometimes uncovering a pattern through grievances can lead to fixing a flawed policy or retraining supervisors, actually improving things long-term. Those moments of salvage are incredibly valuable. Now, we've talked a lot about conflict, disputes, strikes, legal battles, but it's not always about battles, is it? Sometimes the most productive path is about building bridges. Let's shift our focus maybe towards the future of labor relations, cooperative strategies. What does that look like when both sides choose partnership over confrontation? And how does it actually benefit an organization? It sounds nice, but does it work?
It's a crucial shift in mindset, and one that many forward-thinking organizations and unions are increasingly embracing, though it's not always easy. Cooperative labor relations models intentionally focus on partnership rather than confrontation. They operate from the recognition that both parties often have shared interests, like the long-term success and viability of the business, job security for employees, a safe workplace, and can achieve far more together than they can by being perpetually adversarial.
Finding common ground.
Exactly. The core insight here is that when labor and management genuinely collaborate, they can unlock significant value for everyone involved, employees, the company, even customers. There are several concrete examples of these collaborative strategies in action. Joint labor management committees are a common and effective approach. These involve regular scheduled meetings between union representatives and management to discuss shared issues outside the intense atmosphere of formal contract negotiations. They might tackle things like productivity improvements, quality control, employee training needs, safety concerns, or even strategic business decisions.
So ongoing dialogue, not just when the contract is up.
Precisely. Gain-sharing programs are another excellent example. Here, employees, often through their union, share directly in the financial benefits resulting from improved productivity, cost savings, or quality enhancements they help generate. This directly aligns the economic interests of labor and management. Imagine everyone in a factory getting a bonus because they collectively figured out how to reduce waste by 10%.
Create a shared incentive for success.
A powerful one. There are also joint training and upskilling initiatives where the company and the union collaborate to invest in workers' growth and development, ensuring the workforce has the skills needed for future technologies and challenges. This isn't just about current jobs, it's about future-proofing careers and the company's capabilities together.
Investing in people, jointly.
Yes. And increasingly, we see shared governance on safety and scheduling. This means workers, through their union, have a direct, meaningful say in operational decisions that affect their daily lives and well-being, participating on safety committees with real authority, or collaborating on more flexible scheduling options. It moves beyond just compliance to genuine involvement.
Giving workers more control.
Exactly. A fantastic real-world illustration of this philosophy in action is the Toyota Lean philosophy, often studied in business schools. Toyota famously integrates its workers into problem-solving directly on the factory floor. They empower employees and teams to identify inefficiencies, suggest improvements, and even stop the production line if they spot a quality issue without fear of reprisal.
That's real empowerment.
It is. This isn't just about efficiency. It fosters a deeply engaged and empowered workforce. It leads to significantly fewer traditional labor disputes, much higher overall employee engagement, and demonstrably superior product quality. It shows how a philosophy of continuous improvement, when genuinely applied to labor relations, can create a highly harmonious and productive environment.
Proving collaboration can work.
It proves that both sides ultimately benefit from a more collaborative relationship. What's truly fascinating here is how much common ground can be found and how much value can be created when both sides actively look for it with an open mind and mutual respect.
Those are powerful examples demonstrating that collaboration isn't just idealistic, it's pragmatic, leading to real business advantages and, hopefully, a better working life for everyone involved. We've covered so much ground today, it feels like we've been on quite a journey.
We certainly have.
From the challenging historical roots that sparked collective action, we navigated the groundbreaking legal frameworks like the NLRA and the Balancing Act of Taft-Hartley. We explored the intricate dance of collective bargaining and the ultimate pressure points of strikes and lockouts. And finally, looked at this promising path towards cooperative strategies. It's been a profound journey, really, a complex tapestry woven with threads of human resilience and the continuous search for fairness and voice in the workplace. What stands out to you from this whole journey, looking back?
For me, it's the dynamism you mentioned earlier, how this field is constantly evolving, adapting to economic shifts, technological changes, new workforce demographics, and legal challenges.
Right, it's not static at all.
Not at all. And that dynamism is precisely why labor relations remain an absolutely central cornerstone of HR strategy, not merely a side issue or just a legal obligation to manage. The overarching takeaway, I think, is clear. An engaged, well-informed workforce operating within a culture of transparency, respect, and proactive communication significantly reduces the likelihood of conflict and demonstrably enhances overall organizational performance.
It comes back to culture and communication.
It really does. It's about recognizing that investing in fair, respectful relationships with your people is not just good ethics. It's fundamentally good business. Perhaps organizations should increasingly view unions not purely as adversaries to be contained, but as potential partners in progress, especially in these cooperative models. Balancing legal obligations with genuine employee advocacy and a deep commitment to fair treatment seems to be the most sustainable path to fostering cooperative, productive labor environments for everyone involved.
Such a powerful thought to leave us with, and a vital perspective for any leader or, frankly, any employee navigating today's workplaces. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into labor relations. We hope it sparked your curiosity, maybe demystified some things, and given you, our listeners, a new, richer perspective on how workplaces truly function and evolve. Keep exploring these vital topics.
And remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to understanding the complex relationships that shape our working lives and the world around us. There's always more to learn.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, see you later. Bye-bye.